Mm. Hello, friends. Today we are going to talk about medieval India. However, we have completed one class on ancient India, and this is a continuation of that. So, if you really like the video, please try to share as well as subscribe it. So, today, let's start with medieval India. Now, in the last class, I have talked about ancient India, the introduction to ancient India. Now, the next phase which comes is medieval India. But, however, in order to understand the aspects of medieval India, we need to understand one more aspect of it, which is very much important while studying history and also understanding Indian history. Now, when we talk about medieval India, we generally talk about a period of Indian history whereby we were dominated by some other powers, namely the Mughals, who were dominant for a very long period of time. Now, so therefore, what happened after this kind of domination that happened to India? It was observed that the cultural transformation that took place. That means the domination was not only in terms of administration or politics, but also there was a uh, dominance over the cultural aspects of Indian history. So, therefore, in order to understand such domination, such cultural domination, we really need to know about the original type of culture that existed in India before this period came into being. Now, in order to understand that, we need to study a bit about the Indian art and culture, which is also a part of the syllabus of the government exams. But however, it remains a very important part, which we really cannot skip it. So, therefore, in order to understand medieval, we need to understand what was the Indian culture in original, what the text of Indian origin talked about our culture. Now, so we would talk about the cultural history of India, which can also be studied in a different section of history. So, so if we're clear about this topic, then we can easily make a comparison with the other one, that is the medieval India, and therefore understand both the phases quickly and in a very comprehensive manner. Now, when we talk about culture, there are various aspects of the society that we need to understand before understanding Indian art and culture in a comprehensive way. Now, in order to um, get a systematic understanding, what we need to do is, you know, categorize different sectors of the society and thereby study them in details. For example, when we say about Indian art and culture, there are certain categories of the things which comes in. They are now, in order to get an overview of Indian art and culture, we can divide, it into Indian classical dance, Indian classical music, the religion and philosophy of India, now Indian paintings, and also Indian architecture. Now, we need to see all these categories into a bit of details. Now, when we come to Indian classical dance, we find various categories under it. Now, suppose in India we have eight types of classical dances which are present. Okay. Now, in order to understand these eight types of classical dances, let us see what all are the eight types. Number one, now Indian classical dances. Now, these all are the eight types of Indian classical dances that is originally in the Indian history. Now, first of all is Bharatnatyam. When we talk about Bharatnatyam, we need to understand the foremost thing is that it is being performed mostly, or it has originated in the state called Tamil Nadu, and it is also considered to be one of the oldest form of Indian dance. Now, when we come to Kuchipudi, again we know that it originated in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Now, when we see Kuchipudi, what we find is that it is basically performed by a certain group of people in Andhra Pradesh who moves from village to village, and therefore it has its own unique form, and therefore it is listed in one of the classical dances of India. Now, when we talk about Kathakali, it is in the state of Kerala. Now, Kathakali, when we talk about Kathakali, this is a dance form which basically um, emphasizes on facial expression, whereby the high kind of makeup is done, and the costumes are also very colorful, and therefore it what they do exactly, there are intricate movement of eyes and eyebrows involved in it, and therefore we can say that Kathakali is very very popular not only in Kerala but also when Indian classical dance is concerned. Then comes Mohiniyattam. It is also performed in Kerala. However, it is a solo kind of dance performed by women, and they are basically performed in temples. Now, the Mohiniyattam, in this Mohiniyattam, what is unique is the costume that is being worn by the dancer. That is, they wear a white sari with a golden brocade. Now, next is Odyssey. By the name itself, it is clear that it is being performed in Orissa, the state of Orissa, whereby this dance form also has a great relevance, whereby we see that a concept called Goti Pur is very much important in this form of dance, whereby boys actually they dress up in feminine getup or girls like getup, and then thereby they dance it in the temples. Then the next comes is Manipuri, which is again in the state of Manipur, whereby we see a very um, uh, different kind of costume that they wear, and whereby we find that the face is being covered by a special type of costume, whereby we find there is no such facial expressions involved, but however, they express, a kind of devotion to God in this form of dance. So therefore, it becomes a very important dance form. Now, the next is Kshatriya, which is again practiced in the state of Assam. However, if we see the origins of Kshatriya, it was started by Shankardev in 15th century AD. Now, when it comes to Kshatriya, we should know that these are basically performed in the religious monasteries called as hotros, whereby uh, we find that only male monks, who are also called as bhakots in the local language, they perform this form of dance. And the music which is being used in this Kshatriya dance is Borgits, which are again the composition of Shankardev himself. And the last one, when we talk, is Kathak. Now, Kathak is basically performed in the state of Uttar Pradesh, whereby it is also unique in its kind because it basically emphasizes on storytelling. And one of the unique features of this dance form is that while the dancer perform it on stage, they continuously try to interact even with the audience in order to convey their story or the message by their dance form. So Kathak also remains one of the very important dance form of Indian classical dance. Now we have seen all these 8 forms of Indian classical dance, but we might find various other kinds of dance forms in India which exist. But however, we should always remember all the other types of dance forms are regarded to be folk dances, whereby local elements are very much emphasized. For example, you can say that Bhangra is being performed in Punjab, whereas Garba is a dance form which is again practiced in or performed in Gujarat. Similarly, Bihu is celebrated in Assam, whereby we find that the dancers perform in a very unique way. Now, this all kinds of dance, other than this 8, all comes in the folk dance category. Now, this is all about Indian classical dance, but however, one overall understanding of the Indian dance form is that the dance form, when we talk about Indian classical dance, we see that Natya Shastra is a book which is very, very important in Indian history, which actually gives the origin of all this kind of Indian dances, and which was written by Bharat Muni. Now, in that book, it is being described that Indian dance can be divided into 2 forms, which is Lashya and the other is Tandava. Now, when we talk about Lashya, it generally means soft movements as well as feminine in nature. Now, when we talk about Tandava, it basically means aggression, aggression, and also strength. Aggression and strength. Now these are the 2 features which are dominant in all of these dance forms. However, somewhere you might see dominance of one of the aspects, say Lashya, or sometimes we see that the combination of both Lashya and Tandava is being observed in the particular kind of dances. So this is all about Indian classical dance. Now the next category comes is that Indian classical music. Now, when it comes to Indian classical music, we again Natya Shastra remains the very important text by Bharat Muni, whereby there is a detailed elaboration about the Indian classical music. Now, when we talk about Indian classical music, we should broadly understand that this kind of classical music in India can be divided into 2 clear parts. One is Hindustani and the other is Carnatic. Now, when we talk about Hindustani and when we talk about Carnatic, we should understand principles which he prescribes are 8 novel principles that a human being needs to follow in order to attain the real salvation. Now we find when we read these followers today, so therefore it becomes a very dominant religion and also an important religion to be studied from examination point of view too. Now in Buddhism, we find that various councils took place in order to spread Buddhism or in order to spread the teachings of Buddhism even after Buddha died. So by those councils, this Buddhism got a wider expression and also it spread it, in a large way. Then when we come to Jainism, we see that in Jainism also it prescribes certain principles by which a person should actually lead his or her life. Now, Jainism, whereby when we talk about Jainism, Mahavir becomes very, very important, whom we need to study. Now, the concept of Tirthankar is also there in Jainism. When we see the origins, Tirthankar means nothing but the religious head, whereby we find 24 Tirthankars in Jainism, and Jainism also speaks similar things like Buddhism, but however, there are slight differences when we go into details. So, this too becomes a very important religion when it comes to Indian context. So, this is all about the religion. Now, when we come to philosophy, we find that there are different kind of philosophies which are being practiced. Now, when it comes to the exam, the philosophies related to the Hindu religion becomes very, very important. Now, let us know few of the names of the important philosophies related to Hinduism. Now, লাগবে না। Philosophies. Now, when we talk about Hindu philosophies, we find all these 5 kind of philosophies, which remains very important in order to understand Indian history, Indian culture, as well as from the examination point of view. Now, we see the first school talks the Samkhya school, whereby it says that it does not believe in any superpower which is present in this universe, but it believes that what is the reason of the origin of the earth is Prakriti and Purush. Now, when this school of thought says that it is the combination of Prakriti and Purush that had actually made this earth or the life in the earth to come into existence. It says that it does not believe in something which is not seen. Say, for example, God. So, therefore, we can say this school actually is very materialistic in nature, whereby it only believes on whatever it sees. Next comes Nyaya school. Now, according to this school, everything in this world is based on inference or logic, whereby salvation can be attained by acquiring real knowledge by human beings. Okay, now they believe that everything in this world um, is, composed of four things whereby we can actually attain salvation. For example, pratyaksh. Number one is pratyaksh. That means inference. We should be logical while thinking. Then anuman. Okay. Perception means pratyaksh. Anuman, it says inference. And then upaman, which says comparison. And shabd, that means testimony or hearing. Now, these all are the ways, according to Nyaya school, that a person can actually attain real salvation. That is by acquiring knowledge from whatever objects are present in this world. Now, the next school talks about Vaisheshika. Now, Vaisheshika is a very contemporary kind of school whereby it believes in the existence of atoms. It says that everything in this universe are made up of atoms, which actually recognizes the character of the universe. Now, it says that atom is the smallest unit of life, and therefore it is very, very small, that is, it cannot be divided, it is indivisible, as well as it is indestructible part of the world. So therefore, it, however, it talks about the element of physics for the first time in Indian philosophy. So the next school is Yoga School of Philosophy. Now here, this school of thought basically believes that salvation could be attained by a healthy lifestyle. That is, it emphasizes on different kind of asanas or the yogas. That means the exercise of both body and mind could actually lead to salvation, because that would lead to proper knowledge and thereby salvation. So yoga school of philosophy basically talks about pranayama, which means exercise of body as well as mind and also your soul. That would actually lead us towards salvation. Now, the last school talks about Mimamsa. Now, Mimamsa school was founded by Germany, and it says that salvation can be achieved through rituals and karma kand. Now, it argues that Vedas contains eternal truth. So, Mimamsa school also becomes very, very important in Indian philosophy, because it actually says that we should go by all the rituals those are prescribed in the Vedas. So, this is all about the overall idea about the philosophies of Indian culture, but however, detailed study would be done later. Now, the next thing comes the Indian paintings. Now, when Indian paintings are concerned, we should understand that why at all do we need to study painting, or else how painting is relevant to history or for our knowledge. Now, paintings, there in the last class I told you that ancient history can be divided into three parts, whereby one part talks about the prehistorical period, whereby we do not find any kind of scripts present. Then, how do we know about that age? Now, we should understand that that age actually is represented or known by certain kind of paintings that are being found of that period of time. Now, when it comes to painting, we should understand that there are different kinds of painting done at different stages, which today actually helps us to know the historical past of our own country, like what was the lifestyle that is being followed by people at that period of time. Now, when it comes to painting, you see, there we can broadly divide Indian painting into two forms. One is mural painting, and the other is miniature paintings. Now, when we talk about mural painting, we should understand that this was the earliest form of paintings found in India. Now, when we talk about mural painting, we should understand the characteristics is that mural paintings are generally very wide in nature, whereby we find that mural paintings were basically painted on huge objects, whereby the paintings were also larger. and those were not very integrate or accurate in nature. But however, they were there, and it bears relevance also because it actually leads us to know what was going on at the time of history where we do not find any scripts. Now, the next form is the miniature painting. Now, when we see the miniature painting, we see that this kind of paintings are smaller in size as well as more detailed, elaborate, and accurate. Therefore, we can understand that this paintings has evolved with the evolution of human beings and their imagination also. Whereby in the first stage we see that objects are bigger, the paintings are bigger, but in the next stage we see very detailed kind of painting whereby we can actually conclude that human being actually developed this art of painting in a more accurate way, whereby we see very detailed work and small size of paper, clothes, etc., were actually used to draw this miniature paintings. But when it comes to mural paintings, we generally find it in huge rocks. So today, even today, we find the paintings of the ancient age. For example, caves of Vimbetka in Madhya Pradesh till now contains or possesses such kind of mural paintings which had been drawn in very early times. And when it comes to mural painting, we basically see all the natural objects were drawn as well as the natural things were used in order to draw the pictures. For example, juice of leaves, juice of flowers, and also sometimes blood of animals. So mural painting talks about the ancient age, whereas miniature painting is very much developed in nature. We see miniature painting till the time of the Mughals, whereby it has actually reached its peak of development. So this is about Indian paintings, which actually talks about our future in a detailed way when interpreted in a correct manner. Now, when it comes to Indian architecture, which also remains a very important part of understanding Indian history. Now, when it comes to architecture, we'll have to understand two parts in it. Now, when it comes to architecture, we first see temple architecture, which can be divided into two parts. One is Nagara and the other is Dravida. Now, temple architecture. Architecture means what? Physical structure or monuments. So, when it comes to architecture of Indian origin, we see that those were mostly expressed in terms of temple architecture. Now, when it comes to temple, we see two parts. One is Nagara and the other is Dravida. Now, when I talk about Dravida, it basically means temples of South India. And when I talk about Nagara, it basically means temples of North India and also other parts. Now, there is a distinct difference between these two temple architecture. So, there are various elements which are present or which are unique to each of this temple architecture. Now, this all were of Indian origin purely. So, we find Hindus very much dominated while forming this kind of architectures. But the next form of architecture in India, which seems to be very dominant in the medieval Indian history, was the Indo-Islamic architecture. Is the Indo-Islamic architecture. Now, this type of architecture basically talks about medieval India, whereby we find the Indo means Indian features getting mixed with Islamic features in architecture, whereby today we find different monuments, different structures which were actually built up by these Muslim rulers in India, by mixing up the Indian features as well as their own features, and thereby giving a different kind of looks to it. Now, which itself becomes a very important feature of Indian history, because even today we find a lot of structures and buildings that were being built by Indo-Islamic architectural style, and which really bears a very, very great importance when it comes to understanding the history and also the art and the craft that are being used in order to build up certain structures, because there are a lot of accuracy and lot of new things that are being included while this architectural form came into existence, and it actually is very beautiful form of art that India could ever produce. So this becomes very, very important when it comes to Indian architecture. So therefore, this is a brief introduction to Indian art and culture, which remains a very, very important topic, not only for your examination point of view, but also in order to understand Indian history in a more elaborate way. Now, in the next class, what we would do is we would go into details of medieval Indian history. Now, when you have a background of the real Indian culture, then you would be actually able to understand as well as compare what kind of cultural domination that took place with the emergence of the medieval Indian history. So, therefore, today we would conclude by saying that Indian art and culture remains very, very important in all these stages in order to know the real features of Indian land when history is concerned. So, therefore, if you like this video, please subscribe it as well as share it. Thank you very much.